I'm so effing excited right now. Bear with me if this doesn't all make sense at certain points, but I'm on cloud 9. I thought it's been long enough since my initial post. I recovered tech from a crashed spacecraft, so consider this that update that I promised. Okay, so let me summarize the boring things that have happened. Firstly, I completed my client's joke calculator, and I'm happy to announce that he's out of my life. Secondly, the silver wiring that I ordered to fix the alien tech arrived. Oh, and thirdly, I succeeded in fixing it. Now, I'm just gonna leave out the technical details because it's repetitive to write. So, after soldering the wires, fitting them into a cable conduit, and reattaching them to the cable head, I sat back and admired my work. I have accomplished what no one else has. Well, not to my knowledge at least. My adrenaline was through the roof, and the more that I looked at the cable, the more pride I felt. I, a human, had just repaired an extraterrestrial piece of hardware. Even though I was ecstatic about the newly fixed cable, I still felt like I was forgetting something. When I picked up the white circuit board, I realized that I only fixed what was likely the visual output for the screen. Yes, I was a little annoyed, and yes, I cried a little. But that didn't change what I had done. Still invigorated with a major sense of accomplishment, I began to analyze the circuit board again. Remember that mysterious switch in the middle of the board? Relative to its position, there was another board-to-cable connector on the bottom of the board. Connected to it, there was a similar cable. It was thicker than the visual output cable, and the plastic coating was white. When I first saw it, I was so sure that it would also be damaged, but no. I nearly jumped through the roof. The white cable was in pristine condition. I had a feeling that it had to be the power supply. So I looked down at the other end of the cord, finding that the plug was, well, not even close to compatible with any power supply in my house. It wasn't the usual two-pronged design that you're used to seeing with cord plugs. It was so strange. The plug was a circular block of metal. I don't know why this alien race loves circles and spheres so much, but who am I to question superior design? I stared at the plug, accepting defeat, and nearly just throwing in the towel. But then I had an idea. If these aliens favor superconductive metal as shown in their choice of silver wiring, then the plug must also be very conductive, right? I had to see if I could find a way to power the screen's circuit board. I knew that I would need some raw electrical power, a power source that would allow me to run a current directly into the plug's metal surface. I didn't need a custom-made outlet. Well, at least not yet. Anyway, I had my sights set on finding a proper power supply. As I paced my room, pondering what to do next, I heard a knock at my door. Due to my last interaction with a shady cop at my door, I just kind of recoiled at the knocking. "Just a minute," I shouted, running my fingers through my greasy, unkempt hair. My fear was high, causing my legs to shake and my heart to race and my face to drip sweat. I had a bad feeling about this unexpected visitor. Did the government somehow catch wind of my stolen alien tech? Were the cops back to put a bullet in my brain? I could see the headlines rushing through my mind. Hermit programmer, victim of random home invasion. They were gonna kill me, take the technology, and make sure that nobody knew the truth of my passing. I debated myself on whether I should answer the door or sneak out the back and hope that nobody sees. I had it all planned out. I would take some bottled water, open my back door, and just bolt into the nearby woods. I almost went through with my plan until I heard a familiar voice. "Come on, man! Are you still alive in there?" A male voice yelled. I had the bottle of water in my hand, ready to shoot through the back and into the thick brush. But I knew that voice. Hesitantly, I approached my front door. I peeked through the peephole, and to my surprise, it was an old friend of mine. To keep both of our identities anonymous, we'll call my friend Greg, and we'll call me John. Relieved, I opened the door, breathing easy and giving Greg a smile. "John, where the hell you been, man?" Greg asked. "I've been here. You?" I replied, tapping my foot impatiently. "I've been making moves, bruh. Selling to the junkies, staying strapped. You know, what's good." I guess I should explain Greg's, hood lifestyle. You see, I used to live in, what you would call a ghetto. Greg was always selling pot and shrooms to the party kids. But selling to junkies, that was unexpected. "Junkies, are you all right?" I inquired, gesturing for him to come inside the house. "I'm better than ever, homie. You know how much paper you make off these fools? It's ridiculous." "I'm sure, Greg, but don't you think that it's kind of fucked up?" "What do you mean by that?" he asked. "Well, I mean that if you're selling to junkies, then you must be slinging some bad shit." Greg had a pretty irked expression on his face. He almost looked like he'd heard that lecture before, and he was sick of it. "Look, man, you gotta get out of that hood-ass place. Look at you, John. You're out here doing computer shit, living in a nice home. And you got nobody trying to run up on you. You gotta sell that smack, man. You gotta make that money and get out." I sympathized with Greg's sentiment. I mean, the only reason I got out of the ghetto was because I pursued my passion. Do you know how hard it is to code when you can hear a drive-by happening 4 blocks away? It's not a very peaceful, comfortable environment to be working in. I get that, Greg, but listen, you're not a bad guy. You don't have to sling that shit to get out of that shithole. You said it yourself. I'm doing well for myself, and I got out doing some nerdy computer shit. Why don't you do what you're passionate about and then work your way up making some clean, legal money?" Greg paused, looking down at the floor, thinking about what I had said. "Hey man, can we sit on the couch? I gotta open up about some personal stuff," Greg asked with sad, desperate eyes. I obliged, walking with him to the couch. However, we couldn't take a load off and rest there because, like an idiot, I left the alien hardware in a bin on the couch. I'm sorry, I guess I left my spare PC parts out. I'll move them." Greg laughed, holding me back with one arm as he reached into the bin. "What is this?" he said as he held up the smooth chrome ball. "This is heavy, John. What's it made of?" With haste, I swiped the ball from his hand, making the atmosphere in the room very awkward. I don't know how this got there, but this is a family heirloom, and it's very important to me," I explained, lying to him as if my life depended on it. "Sorry, John, I just miss fucking with you, man. Brings back the good old days, you know?" With a concerned face, I sat Greg down, taking a seat next to him as I listened to his words. "Things have been pretty bad back at home. My ride got impounded. My girl was fucking some punk. and my dad got beat up by some dudes that I ripped off. You're ripping people off now? I retorted, a tone of sarcasm in my voice. Oh, not like that, not all the time, bruh. I couldn't get all the coke I needed from my supplier, so I cut the brick with some flour and sold it. Ah, so why'd they beat up your dad? Why not kick your teeth in? Greg chuckled, looking as if he needed a good laugh. I wasn't home. I guess they just beat the fuck out of my dad to send me a message. If I ever see those guys again, I'll pop them on sight. With that, Greg lifted up his shirt, retrieving a pistol from his waistband. Whoa, put that away, Greg, I exclaimed, leaning back in my seat as he waved the gun around. Cool it, man, I ain't some dopey-ass fool. I know my gun safety, Greg replied, tucking the pistol back into his waistband. Yeah, I would assume you have to be an expert in gun safety, considering the fact that it's always pointed at your dick, I said. Greg let out a jovial, hearty laugh, clinging onto my shoulder as his face turned red. That's the shit I missed. You're a goofy motherfucker, John. I haven't laughed that hard in a long time. Thanks, but none of that answered my question. Why don't you just chase your passion, then make money off it? An awkward silence washed over the two of us, only breaking after a long sigh from Greg. Well, man, that's the thing. I don't know what my passion is. I stay on the grind, trying to make enough money to get out of that place. But after that, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I nodded, thinking of something to say that would make him feel better. Well, you like selling things and you're apparently good at it, so why not pursue that? And no, I'm not talking about drugs, I said. Greg snickered, shrugging as he threw up his hands. You think that I like selling? Man, if I could make as much money flipping burgers as I do selling, then I'd be doing that. Being the antisocial, borderline misanthropic person that I am, I was at a loss for what to say to him. I struggled to say anything of use to Greg, but since he's a chatty kind of guy, he carried the conversation for me. Look, bro, I appreciate the hell out of talking to you, but man, I got some business to get on top of. I was just looking for a real homie to catch up with, 'cause honestly, there ain't no real friends back home. And with that, Greg stood up, gave me one of those handshakes/hugs, and then left. As I watched the only friend that I've seen in months drive off, I felt an emptiness grow inside of me. It's been way too long since I've seen him, and really, that goes for anyone else in my life. However, I couldn't let all of that get in the way of my work. As much as my isolation ate away at me, it also gave me the time and privacy that I needed to work on the alien technology. After Greg's car drove over the horizon, I knew I had to immediately begin working again. It wasn't a choice for me. I had to know what that small, cracked screen would show me. Fumbling with the cord, I shut my blinds, making sure that absolutely no prying eyes could see me. Sure, I practically live in the middle of nowhere, but the thought that someone could be watching me made my skin crawl. Once again, I took a good, long look at the circular, solid piece of metal at the end of the plug. I knew that I needed raw power, but finding a source wasn't going to be easy. I thought of many ways to obtain such a source, but none of them seemed to be a sound idea. I thought of stripping the outlet, but I had never done that before, and I didn't feel like killing myself with a 20-amp current. I thought of taking apart my microwave, using something inside to apply a direct current to the plug, but once again, I didn't want to risk getting fried. Nothing I thought of was going to be safe to attempt. And at the time, I wish I had tinkered with more hardware than software. Just when all hope seemed to be lost, I had a revelation. I was looking in unfamiliar, untouched territory. So why not search for solutions in my own ballpark? I had to be more like Greg. I had to stick with what I know. That's how I got the cable fixed. So why not keep running with it? I wasn't going to let this weird-looking, confusing alien tech intimidate me. Think more like Greg, I muttered, scratching my head as I grasped at the straws for a solution. That right there is when I had my aha moment. Flashes of watching my old friend drive off in the distance began to fill my head, giving me one of the brightest ideas that I had had in a while. If I wanted a decent, stable, safer source for a power supply, then I needed to look no further than my front lawn. Look, now, I'm not a car guy, but I had to know how to jump one after the countless times that the battery had failed. Those high school days were rough, and my parents couldn't afford to buy me a new car, so they settled for an old family hand-me-down. I'm a genius, I said under my breath, abruptly making a beeline for my front door. With the small screen in my hand, the exposed circuit board's power cable dangling, I popped the trunk on my car. Even though I had a better, more reliable vehicle, I was glad that I was paranoid enough to keep my old jumper cables around. My plan was simple. Hook the oddly structured plug onto a jumper cable, attach the other end to the positive terminal of the battery, and watch as the alien tech hopefully comes to life. Carefully, I set up the battery to the plug, hoping all would go well. I must have triple-checked that both ends of the jumper clamps were properly secured. And can you blame me for being more mindful than usual? You try repairing some otherworldly piece of hardware. Tell me how easy it is and not stressful it was. Taking a deep breath, I fished the car keys out of my pocket. I don't know why, but I decided to start the car on the count of 3. Maybe I was giving the luck enough time to soak into the scene, but I felt compelled to take my time. 1, 2, 3. And with that, I heard my car engine rev up, followed by a light, fine purring. You know, I really didn't take into account that I could have destroyed the technology with an overload of power. But I didn't. In shock, I stared at the screen. I couldn't believe my eyes. The screen was on. You know when you turn on the TV and there's no picture coming through? But you can tell that it's on because of the light, faded, bluish color. That's what I was seeing. At first, I thought that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to get much other than a slightly brighter display. However, when I saw a bizarre, foreign symbol pop up on the screen, I was astounded. I nearly fell to my knees, my vision clouded with tears. I was gibbering incoherently, stumbling over the powered screen. After my legs finally gave out from the overwhelming emotion, I saw the alien symbol disappear, causing my heart to drop straight into my stomach. At that point, I thought that I had completely fried the circuit board. I was simply looking into the black screen, noticing just how disheveled I appeared in the reflective glass. I wanted to weep, but this time not out of joy or astonishment. I wanted to cry because I believed that I had failed. In a fit of rage, I pounded my fist into the concrete of my driveway. I screamed, I cried, and handled myself like a mental patient off his meds. I wanted to take that screen and throw it at my useless car and burn both of them in a devastating fire. but then I heard a faint whirring noise. Lifting my head off the ground, wiping the tears from my face, I saw the most beautiful sight. The screen was displaying an assortment of alien text. Once again, I had reached nirvana. Laughing maniacally, I scanned the indecipherable language with frantic eyeballs. Yeah, I couldn't understand a lick of what the screen was showing me, but that didn't matter. I fixed and successfully powered a piece of hardware that I, and the majority of the human race, have never seen before. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could or will ever match the elation that I felt. It was like the most intense drug, and I needed another dose. I sprung to my feet, doing a celebratory dance that must have made me look like an insane person. I was fist pumping, kicking my feet into the air and making all sorts of inhuman ape-like noises. Unless you've died, gone to heaven, and came back with proof of the afterlife, and were the only person to do so, then you wouldn't and don't have the capacity to understand the amount of pure ecstasy that I was in. In my hysterics, I didn't notice Greg standing right behind me. John, did I sell you some shit earlier or what? Greg said. Greg, why are you here? I exclaimed, trying my best to play off my excitement like it never happened. Greg eyed me up and down, probably wondering why I was having a psychotic break in my driveway. Well, I think I left my wallet somewhere in your couch. I can't find it anywhere. As Greg spoke, I could see that he was peering over my shoulder, looking at my car battery setup. John, what are you doing, man? You need a ride to the hospital? He asked. Honestly, I can't fault Greg for assuming that I had lost my absolute shit. All he was seeing was my car running, jumper cables hooked to some screen on the ground. And to top it all off, he just saw me doing a corrupted Indian rain dance. Greg, can you keep a secret? I asked. Temporary insanity impairing my judgment. Yeah, sure. My friend replied, his voice rife with concern and reluctance. I know I'm gonna sound crazy, but you gotta believe me. After that, I began to ramble about the crashed spacecraft, the dead alien that I saw inside, and how I came to possess the hardware that I have now. The more my story dragged on, the more he seemed to distance himself from me. I think he was freaked out, maybe even scared of me, but I just kept blathering on. And then I had the idea to hook the plug up to my car battery, and guess what? It worked. I stammered, making sudden, fast hand gestures to drive my story home. Okay, so where is that alien shit? Greg inquired, his brows furrowed in confusion and worry. Without hesitation, I took him by the arm, pulling him over to the working monitor. This is it. You see all that mumbo-jumbo? That's an alien language. I yelled, unable to use my normal, sane-speaking voice. Greg crouched down, squinting his eyes as he inspected what was on the display screen. John, are you messing with me? He asked. I was shocked and quite offended by the notion. I was about to rip Greg a new asshole when I realized that all of this seemed like a big, stupid, nonsensical joke. Greg, look, you know me. Have I ever fucked with you this much? Greg kept his eyes on the foreign text, shaking his head as if he wasn't buying my story. Homie, you're a computer nerd. If anyone's gonna fuck with me about some technology, it's gonna be your goofy ass, he said. I did all sorts of mental gymnastics, trying to come up with any way to prove my claims. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to prove any of this was real. The craft was taken away by government ops. The technology was so similar to ours that anyone could piece together some bullshit fictional language. Plus, Greg wasn't the most tech-savvy guy. So, any explanation that I could give him about the hardware would just fly over his head. Greg, I know I look like I lost my mind. But you know that I'm a cool, level-headed guy. Please, just let me show you the rest of the stuff I got. Begrudgingly, Greg stepped inside the house with me. He made himself at home on the couch, watching me carry the monitor through the doorway. Yo, I thought you said the car battery was powering that thing, Greg said, pointing to the monitor in my hands. I scoffed, believing that he was trying to mess with me. As I turned the monitor around, I totally thought that Greg was trying to prank me, seeing if I would drop the non-existent act. But to my surprise, the screen was still on. The alien text was still being displayed. The faint whirring sound was still present, and I couldn't figure out why. Listening closely to the whirring, I traced its origins to the exposed circuit board on the back. Interestingly enough, there was a tiny green LED on the bottom of the board. I hadn't noticed it before, but I did notice the thin, square black card that the light inhabited. Originally, I thought nothing of that card, simply believing that it was a component that I couldn't understand. Therefore, I didn't include it in my initial post. However, when I saw that the card was attached to the power connector, I knew what it was. That little, insignificant black card was a rechargeable battery. What is it? Greg asked, sounding more unsure that I was pranking him. Nothing. Not like you'll fucking believe it anyway, I replied, setting the monitor on the coffee table. Greg went silent, opting to sit back and twiddle his thumbs. You know what? Remember that heavy chrome ball you found? I said, rummaging through my bin of alien tech. I lied, it's not a family heirloom. I don't know what it is. I tossed the ball to Greg, promptly returning to rummaging for more hardware. Yeah, man, it's heavy and smooth, but that don't mean it's from outer space, Greg asserted, fiddling with the chrome sphere. Annoyed, I snapped at my friend. Greg, just listen. You don't get how big this is, do you? You can't believe me even though I have the evidence right here, but I'm supposed to believe that you're actually trying to get out of the ghetto? You have nothing to show for it. Greg's face dropped into a serious, angry, contemplative expression. What, Greg? What, you gonna try to fight me? You just have trouble accepting the truth, don't you? I said. As soon as those words left my mouth, my friend hurled the chrome ball right at me. I recoiled, anticipating a broken, bloody nose. But then, nothing. I thought that he had missed me, so I opened my eyes, expecting to see him charging at me. But no. Greg was still sitting on the couch, slack-jawed, looking like he was hypnotized. My brain raced to connect the dots of the situation, but then my eyes were flooded with unwanted sunlight. Blinded, I took a step back, only to see the chrome surface of the ball was reflecting the light into my eyes. It took me a moment, but when I noticed it, my head nearly exploded. The ball was floating, but it wasn't drifting aimlessly. It was seemingly stuck in a single frame of time. In disbelief, I waved my hands around the orb, thinking that somehow I was seeing things all wrong. John? Greg choked out, sounding like a little girl that just spotted a big hairy spider. I continued to swing my arms around the levitating ball, eventually grabbing my head as I stared in pure awe. Do you believe me now? I stammered, still frozen in shock. Greg didn't say a word. He simply nodded his head, captivated by the impossibility of what he was seeing. Hesitantly, I raised my arm, reaching out for the gravity-defying object. As my hand drew closer to the orb, I began to feel this, I don't know, resistance. It was like trying to touch two magnets together. But right as I was about to grab the ball, it moved away. It was incredible. The sphere moved, but only in the complete opposite direction of my hand, and without any kind of wobbliness. It was almost like it was on a table, and it was rolling in a straight line. But it wasn't rolling at all. "John," Greg whispered, watching the orb move with bated breath. Just when I thought that I had it, the orb fell to the floor with a thud. This startled Greg and I, causing us to jump and scatter away from the grounded sphere. In silence, we stared at the chrome ball, waiting for it to blow up or something. Greg, you want to get it?" I asked, still breathing heavily from the fear and confusion. "Fuck you, man. You get that thing," Greg yelled, his voice cracking as he stood behind me. Reluctantly, I bent down, reaching out my quivering, clammy hand. Like taking off a band-aid, I grabbed the chrome sphere without thinking. Slowly standing upright, I treated the ball as if it were an explosive. My mind raced as I held the thing. Because if it could randomly start floating whenever it wanted, then who knows what else it could do. Yet again, sunlight reflected off the surface of the orb. And with that, my fingers were instantly pushed apart. Greg and I scattered once more, but this time I noticed a pattern. As I stared at the levitating object, my fear began to dissipate. I stepped closer to the chrome globe, observing its behavior. Wary, I stuck my arm out, making a crane-like motion towards the sphere. I felt the resistance again, and like last time, the sphere began to move in the opposite direction. When it floated out of the view of the window, the sphere dropped to the floor, making something click in my brain. I looked up at the blinds, taking note of the sunlight shining through, then back down at the chrome ball. At that point, I gained somewhat of an understanding of what was going on. "Solar power," I mumbled, picking up the ball. What?" Greg choked out, still keeping his distance. "This thing, it's solar powered. Watch." I held the ball up to the sunlight shining through the blinds, successfully suspending it in the air again. "See, Greg, nothing to be scared of." My friend stepped up to the floating orb, still unsure of the safety. "This is amazing, Greg. I can't fucking believe this." I chuckled, playing with the levitating chrome ball. "Dude, this shit's going on YouTube," Greg said, his phone out in front of him. Almost instinctively, I slapped the phone out of his hands. "Greg, you said that you wouldn't tell anyone," I barked, exasperated, worried about the wrong people finding out. Stuttering, my friend tried to make a case for himself, promising that he would post it under an alt account. Apparently, Greg doesn't think that government operatives could track us down, all because he created a different social media account. After lecturing my dumbass friend on how internet anonymity works, I put the sphere back in the bin, then took a breather in my office chair. You know, I was really trying to chill out after that thing, but Greg was pacing the room nonstop. He kept murmuring to himself, giving me some creepy, uneasy vibes. "John," Greg shot out abruptly, turning his head to me as he chewed his nails. "Yeah," I replied, leaning back in my chair, letting the ceiling fan dry the sweat off my face. "You think this shit could make us big money?" Greg asked. I threw my hands up in the air, shaking my head with a dumbfounded expression. "Dude, we're not telling anyone about this. How many times do I have to tell you that?" Greg sighed, looking like a child on the verge of a tantrum. "John, man, ain't no black ops gonna roll up and kidnap us," he said. I giggled, rubbing my forehead due to the headache that he was giving me. "You're the most dense motherfucker I've ever met." I watched the military literally airlift that spaceship out of the woods. They used a tarp to cover it up, Greg. A tarp. You don't think that they want this kind of shit hidden? Both of us would go missing, and that's why we're not telling a soul about this. Greg just kept at it. He devised ridiculous schemes to sell the alien tech anonymously, begged me for just one circuit board, and overall, he just didn't get it. "Greg, get out, will you?" I said. My friend shrugged, turning his back to me as he stormed off. "Thanks, John, you really got your priorities straight," he said. He slammed the door, knocking one of my paintings off the wall. I don't mind too much. Those flowery, generic paintings of rivers and lakes are a dime a dozen. Plus, now I had peace and quiet. I could work on the more tangible piece of hardware, the monitor. Honestly, calling it a monitor now is a misnomer. Knowing that it's basically an extraterrestrial computer, I should probably refer to it as such. The time I had with that alien computer opened my eyes to a few things. Firstly, there's a power button on the bottom right of the frame. And secondly, there's a keyboard. On the bottom of the frame, right in the center, there's a barely noticeable slit. Out of curiosity, the very thing that got me to this point, I went to go touch it, only to have an entire keyboard unfold before my very eyes. Obviously, the keys weren't labeled with anything recognizable, but on the left were 4 rows of keys, up, down, left, and right arrow keys to be exact. That was just about the only normal thing on the keyboard, and I fully intended to see what I could do with it in terms of interacting with the user interface. I booted up the computer, sat through the weird, multi-angled loading symbol, and watched as the alien text engulfed the screen. I sipped my coffee, analyzing every little facet of the alien operating system. In a neat, single-filed line, the white text descended the screen. However, next to the first line of text, there was a small red circle. Again, these aliens have an infatuation with circles. Using the arrow keys, I made the circle move to the second line of text below. It seemed like a menu. It acted like a menu, but I didn't know how to click things. I inspected the keyboard again, scanning my eyes across the unfamiliar, baffling symbols. On the right, there was a key with yet another circle. I assumed that that would allow me to select whatever option the cursor hovered next to. And I was right. I selected the first one naturally, and it brought me to a new screen. The screen displayed, wait for it, another circle. Next to the big white circle, there were more odd symbols. The symbols were angular and, strangely enough, almost crop circle looking. The symbols got less complex as they descended next to a thin vertical line. The symbol at the very bottom was a simple dot, while the symbol at the top was 5 angled lines, complete with a dot in the middle. I had a hunch, but I wasn't too sure about it. Not until I counted all of the symbols. There were 50 of these strange, hieroglyphic-like symbols, and upon further examination, each line seemed to match the number that the symbol was. The lines didn't follow the rule upon reaching 10, however, so I didn't know, but I think they're numbers. Anyway, I don't know what that screen was supposed to be for, so your guess is as good as mine. The cursor was nowhere to be seen, so I just pressed the circle key again, and I was taken out of the mysterious screen, back to the main menu. I selected the second line of text. This screen, however, was chock full of the same type of symbols from the main menu, but this time, coupled with those numeral characters. I didn't want to fuck with it, but I didn't know how to exit the screen. The cursor was hovering next to an input box, and I wasn't about to type random shit into it, so I just carefully navigated around with the arrow keys. Eventually, I found the exit by clicking on two symbols, sitting to the left of the screen, bordered with a white box. The next screen was far more unique than the last two, although, just like the others, I have little to no idea what it was about. I clicked the third line of text. Then I was immediately greeted with a white loading bar. Characters were appearing at a rapid pace below the bar, and then it stopped loading midway. It took me to a screen with more alien text, almost like it was telling me that something failed to do something. Descriptive, I know. The fourth screen was, well, very interesting. There was a big square plane. On that plane, there were so many little circles. I'm starting to love circles now. Anyway, I just used the cursor to select the square plane. And with that, I could use the arrow keys to rotate the field or select one of the many circles. When I selected one, a window would open, showing me a bunch of text that I couldn't understand. To me, it looked like a map of some region in space. And the circles? Well, they were likely planets, stars, or maybe entire systems. However, the most interesting or unnerving thing about the map was this. There were also tiny blue triangles, and these triangles were moving at different speeds. Upon selecting one of them, another window popped up, and guess what? I still couldn't understand it. Although in that window, there were numerals on the very bottom, and they were shifting. Was it keeping tabs on the speeds of those objects? I believe so. The blue triangles were mostly orbiting and or emerging from blue circles, save for a few stragglers. As I selected another blue triangle, I noticed something that I hadn't with the previous window, an option button. I was hesitant to click it, but damn, I was high on curiosity. I mean, I was peering into an unseen, uncontacted world of potential. And who knows how long this tech will last. What if the government really did catch wind of what I was doing? What if I never get another chance to see every feature of this alien program? I had to do it, letting out an exasperated grunt. I was about to click the option box, but something felt wrong about it. My paranoia often meddles with my intuition. So, whether it was the right choice to not click it, I don't know. And, well, that brings us to now. As I write this, the computer is powered off, sitting in the bin. I'm tired. Very, very tired. But I needed to bring you guys the update that you wanted. You know what? How about some interaction? I want you, the one reading this, to give me some advice. I want to know whether or not I should click on that mysterious, kind of intimidating option next time. Sure, I don't think it's a good idea, but maybe you guys can persuade me. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I'd likely do it on my own at some point. So, just give me some of your thoughts on it. Anyway, good night. Hope you stay tuned for the next post.